Welcome back. Okay, just you and me now. It's a private class. So, pay careful attention. I have a question. Question number 1. Ask me, you. Ask me if I could say intelligible words when I was only 18 months old. Yeah. Ask me if I could say. Could you say intelligible words when you were 18 months old? I think so, yeah. I could say intelligible words when I was 18 months old. I was a late bloomer when I was a little baby. A late bloomer. I think I'm a late bloomer in general in life. And my son and my daughter are both late bloomers too. I think it's part of the family. But late bloomers often are the best at what they do. ¿Me estás entendiendo? Okay. Bueno, vamos por partes. Late is tarde. Has llegado tarde. You're late. Llegas tarde. You're late. I demand absolute punctuality. You're not punctual. You're late. So late is tarde. Llegas tarde. En inglés decimos estás tarde. You are late. You're late. You're late. What's the problem? What was the problem? You're late. You're late. 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 You are late. Now, a late bloomer, late also means tardío. A late marriage, un casamiento tardía. Okay, a late. And a late bloomer comes from the verb to bloom. To bloom. Bloom. Como room, habitación, quitas la R, pones BL delante, y bloom. ¿Y eso qué significa? What does that mean? What does bloom mean? Well, it means the same as blossom. To blossom. Okay. Good. What does blossom mean? Well, to blossom means physically to flourish. Flourish. Florecer. Ahí está. So to bloom is when you have the bulb of a flower and it opens in the beauty of the rose or the carnation, of the magnolia, just different flowers. They bloom. The flowers bloom in the springtime usually, and some flowers bloom, no sunflowers. Sunflowers son girasoles. Sunflowers. Pero yo digo cerrando la boca con la M como siempre. Some flowers bloom at different times during the year, several times a year. Blossom es también es florecer, to blossom. Pero tenemos una expresión en inglés, un tardío florecedor. Se refiere a gente cuyas capacidades o potencial se manifiesta más tarde que para otras personas. And this is important. This is especially important for educational systems. And it's a problem everywhere, not only in Spain, but it's a problem in Turkey, in China, in the United States, in Mexico, in Sweden, Finland, everywhere. It's very difficult for public educational systems to help late bloomers. Kids start school at age 3, perhaps, preschool, and they go through kindergarten, start first grade, usually when they're 5 or 6 years old. First grade is primero de primaria. And so they stay together at the same age. The kids are 6 years old, and when they are 7 years old, they have graduated to second grade or primary 2, primary 3, primary 4, and they move up. But some kids bloom earlier than others. Physically, some kids mature, madurar, mature, later or earlier than others. Physically, and sometimes mentally and intellectually and psychologically. Okay? And it's very difficult for the educational systems to accommodate this change, okay? Because some students can be brilliant when they are 12 years old, and other students will not become brilliant until they are 14. But when they are 12 and they first start to study, for example, algebra, well, for one child, for one young adolescent, it could be very, very difficult, and for the other, very easy, because of their growth is different. And this, one of the child, for whom it's very difficult, can become demoralized, demotivated, depressed, dejected, and can start hating mathematics. And it's a problem because 2 years later, that person could be the best, but it's too late. that child has lost complete interest in mathematics because of his first year algebra. And he decides to go through humanities to study different ways. And we lose a potential scientist, engineer, etc., because the educational system cannot accommodate different paces, different rhythms of progress. So a late bloomer, I'm a late bloomer. A late bloomer, un tardío florecedor. My mother was very worried about me, okay? She was very worried about me because I didn't start to walk until I was 13 months old. That's very late. 1 year and 1 month, and finally I started walking. My mother thought I had a physical problem, and I couldn't walk, all right? And I didn't start talking either until I was about 1 year, 3 months. I was more or less a quiet baby. And my mother was always very worried. And often she spoke to my grandfather, her father-in-law. And my grandfather was a doctor, a country doctor, médico de familia en un pueblo, en un condado de Burnett County, Texas. He was a doctor for 50 years, 45 years practicing medicine. He still holds the record, todavía ostenta el récord del condado in partos, okay, in births. I think it's 3,300 babies were born, okay? He delivered 3,300 babies in the county, and it's still a record, they say. And he didn't lose a mother. Not one mother died. He lost some babies, of course, but he didn't lose any mothers. Now, he was a good doctor, and he was a very simple doctor. Very simple in the sencillo. And of course, he said the famous sentences, there's only one thing you can give a common cold, which is 2 weeks. Aquí se dice 7 días o una semana. All right, he always said 2 weeks for a cold. And I remember my mother was worried. Well, I don't remember. My mother told me. She said I was always worried because you were crawling, gateando por el suelo, you were crawling on the floor until you were 13 months old, and you weren't talking. And I said to my father-in-law, I said, Doc, aren't you worried about Ricky? He's not walking. And Doc looked over his glasses, looked at me. He looks all right. My grandfather was not worried. He had seen so many different cases, and I was simply a late bloomer. A late bloomer, okay? So, the question here, could I say intelligible words when I was 18 months old? Well, of course I could. When I was 13 months old, not many, probably. Maybe mommy, poppy, daddy, etc. But between the age of 0 and 5, that's the critical period for speech. That's when you learned Spanish and when I learned English, almost perfectly, really. Think about it. Look at your children or your grandchildren, okay? Look at children who are 5 years old, talking to each other. They're using almost perfect Spanish. Sometimes little kids say rompido instead of roto, and the equivalent in English, all right? Teached instead of taught, all right? Buyed instead of bought, certain irregular verbs. That's common in every language. But they speak fluently, okay? And they speak with a very complex grammatical structure that's impressive for an outsider who's trying to learn the language. When I came to Spain and I was trying to master, estaba intentando llegar a dominar vuestro idioma, I was trying to master your language. One of the most interesting and complicated aspects was the subjunctive. Quiero que vengas. Quería que vinieras. Me han dicho que venga. Me dijeron que viniera. Okay. And it took me a long time to master these expressions and the structures, okay, of the Spanish language that are quite different from the English language. Quiero que vengas, of course, lo sabéis en inglés. I want you to come. Yo quiero tu venir. Suena casi a plan indio. I want you to come. Él me dijo que viniera. He told me to come. Me está diciendo que venga. He's telling me to come. He told me to come. He wants me to come. Es sencillo en inglés, pero muy diferente. Y en castellano es muy difícil, para un extranjero. Me está diciendo que venga, me dijo que viniera. Y quiere que venga, quería que viniera. All right, o viniese. So, it took me forever to master these structures in Spanish. And I remember one time I was eating lunch or dinner in a Chinese restaurant. I don't go to Chinese restaurants often. I like them, but on that particular day I remember very well. And I was sitting at a table with another person. And there was a family next to me, next to our table. And the family probably was the parents and 3 kids, 3 children. One of the children was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and he was sitting at the chair closest to my table. And I remember at one moment during the meal, I heard the little boy, 4 years old maybe, say something like, "Papá nos dijo que nos quedáramos aquí." And I heard him say that, and I say, "Oh, ese pequeño mocoso, that little boy, he's using expressions that I've needed 2 years to master, and I'm a rational adult trying to master second language, and he knew it perfectly." From age 0 to age 5 is the critical period for language acquisition, adquisición de la lengua materna, incluso de más. After that, no, it's too late, my friend, because the compartment in your brain that captures language and endows you, te dota, endow, E-N-D-O-W is dotación, that endows you with the ability to speak languages is from age 0 to age 5. After age 5, you improve the language. You learn how to read it at school. You learn how to write it. Okay? You learn how to express yourself better with better adjectives, better adverbs, better nouns, verbs, etc. So you improve the language, but the basic structure, the agility, la agilidad con que pap, 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 when you're 5 years old, ya lo tienes. You have it in your ear and in your speech. Okay? And then it's simply a question of improving the base of what you have already acquired. After that. And so, if you're a father or a mother or a grandfather and grandmother and you are concerned about your child's education, aquí digo concerned, concerned, aquí digo concerned, worried y concerned. Los diccionarios dirán preocupado. I'm concerned about the future, estoy preocupado por el futuro de mis hijos. I'm worried about the future of my children, not necessarily. So worried and concerned, ambos, según los diccionarios, significan preocupados o preocupado. Sin embargo, hay un matiz de diferencia. Worried, I'm worried, estoy preocupado, implica cierta ansiedad. I'm worried. Okay, frunzo el ceño, I frown because I'm worried. Concerned, not necessarily. Okay? Estoy preocupado por el futuro de la humanidad. In this case, probably I would say I'm concerned. The global warming, other things, high technology can bring possible dangers, so I'm concerned, of course. But I'm not losing sleep every night, so I'm not worried. I'm concerned about the future of my children because I love my children. I'm concerned about the future of my children because I want them to be happy. Quiero que sean felices. Fijaos cómo lo acabo de estructurar. I want them to be happy. So I'm concerned about the future of my children. But again, de nuevo, again, I'm not losing sleep about it, so I'm not worried. Now, if something happened, something imminent, a danger, I could be worried. Okay? But no. La formación es una preocupación continua en esta organización, por ejemplo. Well, no es a worry, no es una preocupación con ansiedad. Training is an ongoing concern in this organization. Ongoing means continuo. It's an ongoing concern in this organization. So, yes. If you're a mother, a father, a grandmother, or a grandfather, and you're concerned, not worried necessarily, you're concerned about your children's education or your grandchildren's education, and you want to do something to help them and specifically with the English language, which is also always a difficult subject to solve, a difficult problem to resolve, I recommend you start the day the baby is born, or the day you take the baby home from the hospital or the clinic. Because from age 0 to age 5 is the magic period in which the child's mind absorbs things and doesn't question anything. I've been teaching for almost 35 years, almost. I've seen maybe everything. I think I've seen practically everything, okay? In the learning process, el proceso de aprendizaje de un idioma, en este caso el inglés. And I have noticed that when children begin to learn English at age 6 or 7, they begin as a beginner, and I'm teaching them. I can't get them to pronounce correctly. It's impossible. Now, if a child, of course, at age 6, if the family moves to England or to Ireland or to the States, etc., to Canada, that child will become perfectly fluent and will gain the pronunciation over a period of 5 years, 10 years, yes. But if you start teaching, if I start teaching your child, and your child is a beginner, and your child is 6 years old, and living in Spain, I will never be able to give your child a native pronunciation. It's already too late. Do you understand? Now, if I start with your child when your child is 3, yes. For some strange reason, after the age of 5, maximum 6, the brain closes to the absorption of languages, and it becomes unnatural, antinatural, poco natural, el aprendizaje de un idioma a partir de los 5 años. So, try to expose your children's ears to the sound of English, sin forzar nada, sin crear ansiedad. Just surround your children 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day, 3 hours a day, as much as possible, with the music of the English language, the sound of the language, and it will penetrate their ears, and when they start learning seriously, they will pronounce much better because they have been hearing the sounds, the native sounds, okay? And so, there are certain critical ages, critical moments in the learning process of a language. Critical moment number 1, when the child arrives home from the clinic and is only 3 or 4 or 5 days old. Even then, the sound of the English language near the baby's ear is productive. That's the critical moment number 1. Critical moment number 2 is at the age of 5 or 6, que ya es tarde. But if you didn't act in the first 5 years, then you need to act at that point, because the child maybe will not acquire perfect pronunciation, but the child can acquire a very good mastery of the language without too many difficulties, okay? At age 5, starting at age 5 or 6. But if you don't have the opportunity, or if it's too late, if your child now is older, the next critical point is 13. 13 is the age of puberty, when children begin to change, okay, physically and intellectually. And it's true, the change is important. Of course, the physical change we all know. The intellectual change is kids become, youngsters, young people, at age 12, 13, 14, they become analytical. Their minds change. And they no longer absorb things or accept things at face value. They analyze. They ask why. They don't understand why. Because the mind becomes analytical. La mente se hace analítica. Sin querer. Usually at that time. So already at age 13, if the child didn't start before, then you have to approach the language partially through absorption, but partially through explanation and analysis. Analizando las cosas. Entonces ya el idioma ya no es una cosa natural, es una cosa que hay que analizar y comprender y asimilar. a partir de los 13 años o 12, 14 años. And so in that case, it's too late. But if the child hasn't started, start then, please. Okay? Start then. With classes, with good teachers. Make sure the teacher is good. It's imperative that the teacher be good. Fijaos cómo lo he estructurado de nuevo. Aquí sí he usado el subjuntivo en inglés, que normalmente no existe. Es imperativo que el profesor sea bueno. It's imperative that the teacher be good. Curiosa forma de expresarse en inglés, pero preciosa forma. It's imperative the teacher be good. And how do you know if the teacher is good? It's very simple. If your child receives the first class, 1 hour, 2 hours, the first class, and you talk to your son or daughter, ¿qué tal la clase? How was the class? Said, a mí me ha encantado. ¿Cómo mola el profe? You have a good teacher. If he doesn't say that, call the academy and change the teacher. It's the most important aspect of a teacher is not the teacher's technical skill. It's the ability of the teacher to teach in such a way that the students love the class. Les encanta la clase. Me encanta la clase contigo, etc. And then they start liking the subject. En este caso, el inglés es el tema. And when the subject becomes attractive, the learning process changes and becomes much more productive. And it all boils down. Se hierve abajo, se dice en inglés, se reduce a. Hay dos formas para decir, todo se reduce a la calidad del profesor. Everything comes down, viene abajo se dice en inglés, everything comes down to the quality of the teacher. Everything boils down. Because when you boil water, slowly the water disappears and it turns into steam and evaporates into the air. Okay? So everything boils down to the teacher. And for a child, it's critical. The teacher must be fantastic. If the teacher's not fantastic, the child's not going to like the English language. He said, oh, otra vez, clase hoy. Oh, qué pesado. All right? So you need to change the teacher. You need to continue until you find a teacher you like or that the child likes. He said, oh, me encanta el profe, como mola. That's the only measurement of a good teacher. And even for adults, even for you, if you receive a teacher in your home or in your office, or if you go to a school and you sit in front of the teacher, if you walk out of the class and you say, otro profesor del montón, change immediately. Change immediately. Because the learning process will be much slower because you will not be properly motivated. Okay? So, my God, I've only done one sentence today. And the sentence is, could I say intelligible words, palabras inteligibles, when I was 18 months old? Yes. Children can speak when they're 18 months. Lengua de trapo, decís aquí. Yes. They can't speak very well, but they can speak. And remember, the critical age for learning a language is between 0 and 5. Children are not analytical. They never question anything. All right? If you start to fly, a 3-year-old child is probably not going to be surprised, or a 2-year-old child. Mamá está volando, okay? You're speaking on the phone. No se puede poner. Está levitando, okay? Children don't question anything. Little children. For example, my children, and I'll finish with this, my children grew up bilingual. Because in my house, I always spoke English. I never spoke Spanish. Never one word. And my wife spoke Spanish. So there were 2 languages simultaneously at the dinner table, at the breakfast, having breakfast, lunch, dinner. In the house, there were 2 languages simultaneously. And for a certain period of years, my children thought that all papas spoke one way and all mamas spoke another. They considered that the reality of life. Not two languages, porque no pensaban en términos de idiomas, simplemente en términos de formas de hablar. Daddy, que yo, had a certain way of speaking, and mommy had a different way of speaking, and that's life. And of course, they absorbed both languages with no problem. Okay. In any case, I'll come back and talk more about the learning process in another class someday, some other class. In the meantime, study, okay? Help me with my job. Thank you very much.